He, possessing immense wealth, yet was the most frugal of billionaires. His name was bestowed upon an asteroid, yet he was the most low-profile tycoon. He left a precious legacy for all of China. He is Tan Kah Kee. In this video, let's delve into his story. On November 20, 1919, Tan Kah Kee was born in Guangdong. His father was a successful businessman. However, their once affluent family faced a sudden tragedy when he was 16. His father abruptly passed away due to illness. The burden of life suddenly fell upon his young shoulders. He had to drop out of school and seek a living in Vietnam. At that time, Vietnam was still under French colonial rule. The status of Chinese people was low. With no support, Tan Kah Kee made a living by selling porcelain clay. He faced threats from thugs and extortion from the local government. But amidst all the darkness, he continued to shine brightly. In just 2 years, using his wit, he created a miracle. As a Chinese young man, during turbulent times, he became Vietnam's largest supplier of porcelain clay. But cruel fate did not spare him. The outbreak of the Pacific War caused him to lose the industry he had painstakingly built. For survival, he had no choice but to leave Vietnam for Indonesia. With his sharp intellect, Tan Kah Kee quickly realized the potential of Indonesia's rubber industry. So, he established a rubber factory, followed by a plastic film factory. After a few years, Tan Kah Kee was already one of the richest in the area. Yet, no matter how much he earned, there was always a void in his heart that could not be filled. It was his homeland, China. In 1958, Tan Kah Kee abandoned his development in Indonesia. He was determined to transfer his business to Hong Kong. In a barren land, he founded Tan's plastic factory and chemical factory. In just 5 years, Tan Kah Kee became renowned as the artificial leather king of Hong Kong, standing shoulder to shoulder with Li Ka-shing, leading figures in Hong Kong's artificial leather and chemical industries. In the 1970s, Tan Kah Kee invested and established factories in mainland China. In Guangzhou, he completed the Tan Building, as well as the development of numerous industrial buildings, becoming a tycoon in southern real estate. By 1980, he was already a well-known billionaire in Hong Kong. And at the peak of his career, he made an unexpected decision to retire and step away from the business world, handing over Tan's industries to the next generation. You see, during that time, Hong Kong's economy flourished. Countless tycoons seized opportunities to expand, competing for the throne of Hong Kong and even Asia's richest. And Tan Kah Kee, in the golden era of business, with his capabilities, could have gained more wealth in this competition. It was a certainty. Yet, he unexpectedly chose to retire. Such a decision only distanced Tan's family business further away from the status of other big tycoons. Why? Tan Kah Kee revealed his heartfelt thoughts. He didn't want to continue the commercial battles, but rather focus on charity work. When he was young, he didn't spend many years in school. Education was abandoned halfway through. It remained a regret throughout his life. After traveling far and wide for many years, he deeply realized that the widespread nature of education was the key to the prosperity of developed nations. So, at the pinnacle of his career, Tan Kah Kee decided to venture into educational philanthropy, using his abilities to ensure more Chinese people had access to education. For education was the foundation of national prosperity. Subsequently, he dedicated his wealth and life to a noble cause. In 1982, Tan Kah Kee sold all 4 industrial buildings, liquidated assets worth $1 billion, using this sum to establish the Tan Kah Kee Foundation, channeling several tens of millions annually towards educational philanthropy. Many wealthy merchants in Hong Kong laughed at him, saying it was foolish, when he could have made money from money, reached higher levels in business. Yet, he chose to pour his enormous wealth into a bottomless pit? His business partners didn't understand him. Only Run Shaw supported his decision. And Tan Kah Kee's response was, leaving wealth to descendants is not as virtuous as accumulating merit for future generations. Tan Kah Kee always believed that the way to a nation's prosperity lies in its people. and nurturing talent begins with education. For decades, he emphasized, China's hope lies in education. Hence, he used his wealth to build schools. In 1983, the first Tan Kah Kee named Paoling Benevolent Society Tan Kah Kee Kindergarten was established. The following year, the first Tan Kah Kee High School was built in Dabu County, Guangdong Province. In 1984, Tan Kah Kee completely left the group, handed over the chemical factory to several sons to manage, stipulating that every year, at least 10% of the factory's profits must be donated for charity. Subsequently, the name Tan Kah Kee disappeared from the rich list, but the realm of charity gained an additional warm blow. Due to the donation rules Tan Kah Kee set, the Tan's industry's business scope diminished. In exchange, rose numerous teaching buildings across the mainland. 1 school, 2 schools, 10 schools, hundreds of elementary and middle schools. 1 building, 2 buildings, 10 buildings, hundreds of teaching buildings. From the initial few million, to tens of millions, to several billion, Tan Kah Kee's 30-year donation. As most donations were used for constructing elementary and middle schools, focusing deeply on foundational infrastructure, Tan Kah Kee didn't attract as much public attention as Run Shaw, who donated to universities. So much so that Hong Kong's tycoons mocked him. Hong Kong has a Tan Kah Kee, donating here and there, unknown. In one's lifetime, it's either for fame or fortune. You, Tan Kah Kee, renounce the fortune. But the name has also faded. What are you aiming for? Tan Kah Kee didn't take this to heart. He said, elementary education is the most fundamental. If primary and secondary schools aren't well established, top universities like Peking University and Tsinghua University won't have good student sources. I only do what's beneficial to society. His sincerity, those children who benefited from it understood, that's enough. And because he donated to so many places, and his enterprises weren't as profitable as before, Tan Kah Kee accidentally found himself short of funds to donate. In 1997, during the Asian financial crisis, Hong Kong's wealthy circles were filled with fear. Some were preparing to move their assets abroad, others were laying off a large number of employees. Only Tan Kah Kee continued to donate to the construction of secondary schools in the western regions of the mainland. However, during that time, Tan Kah Kee's enterprises and the income of the Tan Kah Kee Foundation were also affected, resulting in commitments to donations that were challenging to fulfill. Faced with this situation, explaining the situation to the beneficiaries, waiting it out would suffice, but Tan Kah Kee decided to sell his house for the donation. He was in his 80s, where would he live after selling the house? None of his children agreed, but he insisted on selling. This house is worth over 50 million. The monthly interest alone is tens of thousands. If we stay for a night, we'd lose over 10,000. Is it worth it? Sell the big house and rent a smaller one. We'll lose the large living room, the artificial hills, flower gardens, and fish ponds. But these difficulties can surely be overcome, right? Ultimately, Tan Kah Kee sold the house, using his own luxurious property to exchange for over 20 secondary schools in impoverished areas. He and his wife moved into a small rented apartment amidst his elderly years. Who could have imagined that during his old age, the biggest expenditure in his life was on rent, while other Hong Kong tycoons owned several luxurious homes? Tan Kah Kee continued to rent. Someone asked him, "So much money, don't you feel reluctant?" Tan Kah Kee replied, "The construction of each teaching building, the sound of thousands of students studying, is more meaningful than having the best house in the world, for me and my family." It's this relentless spirit that scattered Tan Kah Kee's fortune, blossoming into Tan Kah Kee buildings across the mainland. In 30 years, this elderly man with snowy hair, dragging his increasingly frail body, braved the scorching sun, endured wind, frost, rain, and snow, step by step, through those villages, and wherever he walked, what remained were newly built Tan Kah Kee teaching buildings. What people admire is not just Tan Kah Kee's devoted philanthropy, but his unimaginable frugality. To spend every penny in a useful manner, the billionaire Tan Kah Kee led a life akin to that of the poor. He had no private car, walked to and from work, no luxurious lifestyle, A pair of shoes worn for 10 years, socks patched and repatched. For quite some time, his family's monthly expenses were only 3,000 Hong Kong dollars. He avoided extravagance, disliked socializing. During his 80th birthday, many wanted to celebrate for him. He didn't host a banquet, didn't accept gifts. Instead, he donated millions to build teaching buildings. During one donation event, a journalist noticed that the suit Tan wore was over 40 years old, fading white from washing. When he traveled, he brought his own soap to hotels. When dining out, he asked for just a glass of water and brought his own packed meal. He said, "I came from the countryside, experienced the hardships of entrepreneurship. It's easy to appreciate that everything isn't easily acquired, even if it's a needle or a grain of rice. During periods of extravagant spending, when items were wasted, I always felt deeply uneasy." This kind of person was often referred to as the most frugal billionaire. He was extremely thrifty with himself, but when it came to education, he would donate millions without hesitation. Tan Kah Kee often said, "If everyone does a small good deed, it will eventually become a great deed, and society will become better. If everyone does a small bad deed, it will eventually become a great bad deed, and society will become worse." In this manner, he saved every penny, turning them into schools, buildings, libraries. Because he was too low-key, for many years, most people had never heard of his name. Even when he left, he departed silently. In 2018, this man, who lived a life of great love and anonymity, quietly departed. 2 years after his departure, people slowly discovered that this old man who left nothing for his children and grandchildren had left the most precious legacy for all of China: 93 universities, 166 secondary schools, 41 primary schools, about 20 vocational schools and kindergartens, and approximately 1,800 rural school libraries. And now, these legacies have turned into great charitable deeds benefiting countless people. With the power of one individual, he brought happiness to tens of millions. A heart filled with such great love, a person of such great deeds, the nation and its people will never forget. This is the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment. We genuinely appreciate your support.